Thank you very much. We've had a very good panel. We had some very rich discussions. And one of the questions that I would want to ask the DPP, Madam Hack, is when you say 60%, like what numbers do those represent? So, you know, but we haven't come to the question and answers yet. We're now getting there. Audience, you have been patient, and I really want to applaud each and every member of the panel for their various contributions. I recall my friend, a colleague of mine from ChildLink, indicated too that reports between 2014 to 2018 suggest that there is 3 times as much sexual violence against boys. We haven't as yet heard any mention about boys. We know that they are in the spectrum of children, but there is an increasing trend towards boys, even though girls continue to be the dominant factor, as we heard in all the data. And from 2014 to 2018, reports suggest that there has been a 55% increase of sexual violence towards the girl child. That being said, I now open up the floor for questions. We're going to take 3 sets of questions at a time, and after that we allow them to answer, and then we go to another round. So we'll have a few rounds. So I see 1 hand, 2 hands, and a 3rd hand. So let's take the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd.
Yes, good evening. I applaud you very much, Ms. Humphreys, for sharing your story. I know that was very hard to do. I don't deny that one bit. I'm curious about the therapy programs that you have for the children. I am an epileptic, and we have an art therapy program for us to vent our frustrations on our issues and just how we feel in general about our epilepsy. So I'm curious if you have a art therapy program for the children. I feel that that is, compared to what we go through, I think it's very important. Now, I'm from the United States, and there's a new thing that's called the break room. The break rooms are just full of, it could be a bedroom, it could be a kitchen, and it's set up so where said person can vent their frustrations. And I actually think that would be very helpful for children, adults, anybody really. And you just go in there and it's soothing. And I think it would be very useful for children, actually. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Good evening, everyone. Great presentation. My question is directed at Ms. Hack. And what I would like to know, based on what the presentation you made, what are the steps that the DPP are taking to further train their prosecutors and their investigators so as to increase the number of cases that go to court with the requisite evidence to ensure that the perpetrators are convicted? And so once this starts happening more, persons will know they can't get away with this thing. So you reduce the chances of the average person thinking they can go ahead and do this kind of a behavior. So what are we doing in terms of that? How are we educating our lawyers to be more sensitive about this? This is not just a case, just a number, but these are people, and they treat as that. You can go to the courts, pass in the courts, and you see the interactions, and the humanity isn't there sometimes, and you want to see that. What are you guys doing to train them more so that you can see?
Thank you, and we go to the final question from Tina.
Yes, I'm trying to phrase what I have to say in a form of a question. And it's really, why is it that corporal punishment, which is the norm in Guyana towards children, not seen as violence against children? Why is it not seen as violence against children? Why is it not seen as abuse? Why is sexual violence not, why is corporal punishment not seen as a precursor, as a platform for sexual violence? Because the punishment of the body, the violence against the body, takes its most extreme form in where sexual violence is concerned. But we still, as a country, children, we heard from Colleen, and thank you very much what you said, when she said, children are a blessing. We do not treat children as a blessing. When you bring and grow up children with punishment and call it discipline, it's not discipline. Punishment is punishment. Punishment of the body is punishment of the body. And when it takes the form of punishment of the sexual parts of the body, because abuse, sexual abuse, does not feel abusive usually at the start, because children know what abuse is, they know what verbal abuse is, they know what abuse to the body is, and they're getting a lot of that. And we have this notion that the majority of perpetrators are actually male. The majority of perpetrators are actually females, because we spend the majority of the time with children. We're the ones who hit out to children for a variety of reasons, having to do with how we are trained, having to do with how society feels about violence to children. That's okay. It's okay at home, and it's okay in the schools. It has to do with how we deal with our issues towards ourselves. It has to do with our relationship issues. It has to do with how we solve problems and how we teach children to solve problems. Then, you know, a British expert who has actually interrogated men who are perpetrators of violence, sexual violence against children. What his name is Raymond Wire, W-Y-R-E. What he found in interviewing and interrogating male sexual abusers is that not all of them suffered sexual abuse as children, but without exception, all of those men grew up in cruel and uncaring childhood. And when we start off children where abuse, violence, punishment is normalized, what type of adult is that child going to become? When boy children are taught that when you have power, this is what you use to solve problems. When boy children are taught that love and violence can cohabit. When girl children are taught, usually by their mothers, that violence and love can be in the same person, that I can love you, my child, my daughter, my son, and I can actually use violence against you, and you have no recourse. And I'm glad that the conviction rate for sexual violence has been increasing and stepping up, but we must not confuse this with justice. This is accountability. Because a child who has been violated sexually cannot have justice. Justice is in preventing it. And we can all play a part in preventing sexual violence by making sure that we do not hurt our children, and making sure that our family members who are hitting their children in the name of discipline, hitting their children in the name of solving problems, hitting their children in the name of punishment, that we speak out against it and we stop it. And the first thing we have to do is to apologize to our children for what we have been doing in the name of discipline. Ourselves become disciplined in how we deal with our children, and we conduct ourselves with discipline. We conduct ourselves with respect. We respect our children, we respect their bodies. Because unless you as a mother or a father can respect your child's body, how will this child understand how to conduct herself or himself with respect? So you apologize, you say you will never do it again, you ask your children to participate with you, and every time they see you raising your hand or picking up a piece of stick or whatever it is we hit children with, let them tell you to put it down. When the words come out of your mouth that are violent and vile and humiliating, you ask your children to help you pull back that word. And then you ask your children to participate. Because this is not a big problem. It is a big problem, but it is something that every single person sitting in this room could do something about. Thank you.
Yes, I want to respond to the question of what we have for children for them to heal. The one-stop centers that we have in operation, they're supported very much by UNICEF, helping us with the one-stop centers, and we're having them all over the country now. They have the responsibility to provide the therapeutic service for the children. So they are, after they've done the interview and so on, the children do get that. But we don't have that physical setting that you're talking about. I experienced that type of setting for children. It really, when I was out there, they took me to one and I fell asleep inside there, rolling with all the things and so on. And I think we're working towards getting it here for children. Right? So Yes, a break room. It's yes. They took me to one. I went to a break. See?
We have overseas training for the staff as well as local training, because most likely when you have the overseas training, it's only like about 3 or 5 of them would go, and then they will come back, and we have in-house training with all the staff. Which one was the 60%? Oh, in 2018. In Demerara, out of 922 cases listed to be heard, 618 were for sexual offense. The 60% is the number of cases listed to be heard. The conviction rate, okay, let me get a conviction rate. Conviction. I found it. 2018 for Demerara, there were 37 cases, and for 23 of those 37 cases, 23 of the 37, there were convictions, 10 acquittals, and 4 hung jury, and that was 62.1% conviction. Berbice, there were 9 cases, and there were 6 convictions for out of the 9 and 3 acquittals. That was 66.6. And Essequibo, 7 cases and 1 conviction, 5 acquittals, 1 hung jury, 14.2%.
That is movement compared to what I used to. Yes, and all the team are working. Whilst we know there is more, there has been some movement. So we have our next round, one at the back, one in front here, and one. So we have our next, and then we're going to take a last round. I'm looking at the time, and I don't want to keep you. So after this round, we're going to have one more.
Yes, my name is Natasha, coming out of the University of West Georgia in Atlanta, Georgia, in USA. And I didn't think that you got an answer to your question, but it did provoke a little bit of inquiry in me. I wanted to know what it is that you're doing to empower women. I think what she was alluding to was that when you're broken, you break people. And when you're hurt, you hurt people, right? Hurt people hurt people. And so if we can empower our women educationally, financially, and emotionally, right? There's a little bit of saying, I don't know all of it, but the way of the women is the way of the household. When we empower our women financially, emotionally, and educationally, we'll see a bit of a difference. I was moved by the sharing of your story and your experience, your lived experiences. And I just thought about what would it have been like if your aunt was emotionally empowered, financially empowered, and educationally empowered to maybe make a difference. Unfortunately, a lot of these instances occur and continue to occur because the women are not empowered to make that move, right? So, and I think that's what she was alluding to. The women in the household need to be empowered educationally, emotionally, and financially. And I think that will help a bit because hurt people hurt people. And when you're broken, you break people, right? So just what have you been doing to empower the women?
I just wanted to make a follow-up, and when I did my presentation, I did mention that There are economic and sociocultural reasons for the increase in the number of the offenses. And following up from my friend there, the home, how it is, the women are dependent on the men originally. Now some of them are getting on economically, but the jobs are not enough, and that goes back to your point of the economics. And I see it from the files a lot. There are a lot of women who are guards, and that's a low-income job. And she has a child, and she's going to leave the younger children with the older children. And while she's gone to work to earn for those children, a man is going to come and interfere with that child from either upstairs, downstairs, next door, at the front or at the back. And the cycle goes on. You have to start first with the economics. We need to economically empower starting our children, and we need to do it to the women. The women are the bedrock of the family. If the women are educated and they know what they have to do and they know to stand for their own economically and have integrity, and they can pass that on to the children and to be loving and humane. And this is what is happening in society. We're seeing it even in the murder files. We're seeing it in the robberies. It's like people have no love for each other anymore. They have no humanity, and they just attack people with no remorse. And they go on about their normal business as if it's the norm. As one of the speakers said, the accommodation syndrome, and the abnormal has now become the normal.
Good evening, everyone. All protocols observed. My question is directed to Dr. Quincy Jones. During your presentation, you mentioned that there are several factors that predispose persons to commit sexual violence. I would like to know, what are those factors and what can we do as a society to bring about a change? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I have two questions for the panel. And first of all, before I do ask those questions, I'd just like to say thank you for sharing your story, Ms. Humphreys. I'm just saying thank you for sharing your story. It's very, very moving, and it must have been quite something for you to go through. But my questions to the panel are, rape kits. Would anybody from the panel, maybe this is a police question, would be able to say, is the rape kit the first port of call for a medical examination when there's child sexual abuse? If it isn't, then why is it not? And secondly, my second question is, what, in terms of multi-agency working, what are the issues involved with the CSE problems there? What can be done to make it better?
The question as it relates to the rape kits, she asked, and the second one is the functioning of the CAC, the Child Advocacy Centers.
That should be answered by the police, but I will try to answer. The rape kits ought to be used in investigation when the complainant goes to the station. And in the case of children at the Child Advocacy Center, because you've heard Ms. Green say we're trying to do everything with the child speaks once to the forensic interviewer at the forensic interview, and the next time the child speaks is in a high court at the trial. So it's just twice we're limiting the child to giving the evidence. The rape kits, and what's the other one? The child advocacy centers, they're basically run by the non-governmental organizations, ChildLink, Forward Guyana, Blossom, and they have all been developing branches throughout Guyana. And we're trying to get the police to also learn to do the forensic interviewing, so that when they're funding, when the funding for them is not available and they can no longer carry on, the police will be able to carry on.
If you allow me to compliment Madam, it's not only just the police. The rape kits we are providing are internationally very well equipped with about 8 to 8 sampling. So I think the implication of the medical part is very, and this is where you see the increase of the case conviction, because it's really science. That's what I say, bring science to law. And it's a way to collect elements, let's say, in a general way, that is very difficult to contest. And so that's why the combination of the medical part science with the police is critical, because it's just not only to collect elements, but then to transmit that element into reporting for a clear, it goes beyond DNA, if I may say. And so it's very good that Guyana is equipped, so there's a lot of capacity building around a combination of medical with reporting on how those cases are made documented to go through the court. See if I can help. So it's really important. It's actually it's a tool, but it has to be used in a way that is very confidential, and there's a lot of very difficult challenges to contest the results. And there are, I mean, that's where you see. I mean, I don't have the details on conviction rates based on test and the thing, but that's something. But that's, you can see definitely. I do believe they are used. I know they have been available, because that's one of the support, and I'm sure they are used. Now, are they systematically used? Are they, can things be done better? Definitely, always. And I think on the CAC, if you allow me, it's actually a very important. It's what I think you explained well. A few of the partners. It's actually where the combination of no one alone can do things come very into practice, because that's actually a space where different services are coming into one objective. The child has to do the story once, and it has to be also receiving the different services, and you were mentioning very important also the timeliness of it. So that's why what can we do differently and more? And I think for the communities to really speak up, bring those elements, and there's a way, it's closer to the home, so it's like the child doesn't have to walk back to Georgetown. So I think the idea is to do more decentralized way and closer to home, because I think the challenge you mentioned is where's the hand that can come and help you has to be close to where the child or the victims are, right? And I think that's where we're not yet there, but I wish for Guyana to have more of those hands closer to the needed people.
I'd like to share what is real. For us to have convictions, the medical report, doctors are critical. And it has been my experience, having worked in the public health system. I have fought tooth and nail to get doctors to actually do what is right. There is a reluctance, and I'd like to ask Dr. Jones, why is there a reluctance by the doctors? Recently, the Rights of the Child Commission, we went to New Amsterdam Hospital, and I asked the doctors, I said, show me by the raise of hands, all who is willing to go to court for a child. Nobody raised their hands. But afterwards, a doctor came and she whispered to me, I've been to court twice. Not one doctor raised their hands. At the Camerville Health Center, I fought with doctors. Doctors just don't want to do rape kit examination. But doctors send it to Georgetown Hospital. Georgetown Hospital send it back to the health center, and it's this crisscrossing until I threatened them to say, I am going to have the police charge you with conspiracy because this child has been... That's the only way they acted. I fought tooth and nail. There is something wrong within our medical professional system. that they don't want to go to court to save children. Not one doctor raised their hands in New Amsterdam. So could you answer me, why is there a reluctance by the health system? Because we need the medical evidence. In Kimani's case, that is what failed us. Critical evidence, and without that, we won't get convictions. We need our doctors on board. I thank you.
Before Dr. Quincy Jones go, I just wanted to be put on record that we held accountable.
Thank you very much, my attorney at law. So if I could first answer the question posed by the gentleman. Some of those factors are the same factors that we see that affect under 5 child mortality. And that's why I said in my presentation that we in the public health department need to take responsibility. For example, the education level of the mother. If a mother has a tertiary education, there's a protective factor against sexual violence for that child, as well as there's a protective factor against many other diseases. Secondly, the income quintile. If the household falls within the lowest or the 3rd% income in quintile, most likely that is a risk factor as well that predisposes to sexual abuse of a child. Next, girls out of school. We find that girls out of school bear the brunt of the burden when it comes to sexual violence. In a study that was conducted with UNICEF and the Child Care and Protection Agency. So those are some of the same factors that affect the health of a child when we look at the traditional public health issues such as non-communicable diseases and communicable diseases. Moving on to the rape kits. The rape kits form an integral part of the medical response to any victim, child or adult, who have undergone or who have suffered from sexual violence and report a medical institution. However, there's always a resource constraint, and with the aid of our development partners, we are now being able to adequately furnish the health system with those rape kits. The next barrier, which will loop into your question, why doctors are a bit afraid, is that the institutional support mechanisms was not fully there. One of the things that a doctor is afraid of is the loss of the license. And doctors have a fear of the courts, is an unknown. When I was growing up, there was a general saying, people tend to respect doctors and fear lawyers. And that fear holds for doctors. So it is a process where we try to educate the doctors on the various laws, on their responsibilities and the mechanisms that are there to protect them when they go into the court of law. And through the aid of the department of the chambers of the DPP and UNICEF, we were able to have a training where we sensitize doctors from region 4, 3, and 5 on the law and how to give evidence and what are their responsibilities in conducting a medical examination. The Ministry of Public Health and the Ministry of Social Protection in 2016 actually devised a standard medical form for the collection of evidence. This was something that, though it was developed, was not fully implemented. And now we're in the stage of implementing this. So I believe that once doctors feel that they have the agency and their responsible regional, responsible health service programs are there to support them, they will come forward and they will be more willing to participate. And for that reason, you have a better reluctance from doctors.
We have Dr. Reynolds, and we have our last 4 persons. Dr. Reynolds, there's another person we can hear, and the gentleman across here.
Ms. Henry, thank you very much. Forgive me if I don't ask a question. I just wanted to put 3 things on the table. When we talk about sexual violence, we only know what we know. We don't know what we don't know. There are many women and men who are highly educated, top executive positions, spouses of pastors and imams, and who will not tell you what is happening. We saw in the late 1990s attention to HIV only when celebrities began to speak out. Until we can get women in authority and men in authority, celebrities speaking in Guyana about the violence that is perpetrated against them in their homes and their churches and their workplaces, it will remain an issue for the working class. It is not a working class issue. It is an issue that cuts across every race, every religion, and every village and town. That's one. Number two, I love music. I love reggae. But the stuff that we hear that makes us numb to who we are as human beings is horrendous. And until, as a society, we can figure out how to allow young people to have a fabulous time in Jubilee Square without preaching violence, particularly violence against women, we're not going to be able to move forward. That is where the violence, the deeply subconscious level, is glorified and celebrated. If I have to buy a new outfit that costs me $3,000 to go to listen to somebody talk about whores and da-da-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee, something is terribly wrong. There's a point of inversion that we have to reverse. The last point I wanted to say is we're investing a lot of money in the criminal justice system, and I applaud that. But let us remember that juries are juries of our peers. And there's an inordinate appetite for violence in our country. The photographs, the posts on Facebook, the way we shout at one another, the names we call one another. These, like Bonita said, are just symptoms of a fairly violent society. And it's difficult for me as a Guyanese to accept that I come from a violent society. It truly is, because after all, we're fun-loving people. But if we listen to what we say to one another, the verbal abuse that precedes the physical abuse, that then precedes the sexual abuse, is simply a sliding scale. And so it behooves all of us, I think, to figure out, when I get to the traffic light and someone cuts in on me, what is my reaction? Because I guarantee that it's only the expression that is different. It is not the violence. When I have to receive unsolicited WhatsApp posts about little kids who have been killed in the most horrendous fashion, that's posted without a thought about whether the child's parent wants that photograph to be flashed around the world. For the love of all of us as citizens, could we get our act together and dial it down? Thank you very much.
Good evening, Raquel Thomas, also from Citizens Against Rape. I just want to play a little bit of devil's advocate, because I find when it always comes to solutions to problems of the world, it always has to come down to women. So I'm hearing about women have to solve, it's all about women being economically empowered. All the panel, two on the panel are men, most are women. So even on the panel, even in the audience, I think there are more women than men. So when are we going to address the root causes? And how are we going to address our boys? Because if we can talk about empowering women, but if we don't address the boys, we'll have this perpetuation of violence. So Benita talks about corporal punishment and so on. It's all linked. And I think at a very young age, we really have to start addressing the issue of consent. And for both boys and girls, and how we approach sex, and how, there's the whole issue too with porn at a young age. Children have smartphones, they're accessing violent porn at younger ages. So there's a connectivity with a number of issues. Where are the men's groups? dealing with this. Men have to be a big part of the solution for sexual violence. Men have to stand up and speak. Men have to speak to other boys. Women are not as effective as speaking to men as a man speaking to a man. So men, you men in this room, men in the church, men in leadership, men at university, men in communities have to be really a big part of the solution, or really we will go around talking about and making this a woman problem. So we have to start from when they're little. I don't know, we can talk about it. How do we make the intervention? I would say, as a woman growing up in Guyana, as a child riding to school, and in those days we used to ride to school and so on. As a teenager, the vile things that would come out of men's mouths. As a child riding, I had a man when I was about 9 waving his penis to me. No, I was about 8 actually. When I was riding my bike, a big man, oh, look at that between your legs, what I would love to do with you. These are the things that women grow up with. And I think a lot of men don't even get it. A lot of men, I was having a conversation with some police officers the other day, and the whole conversation went back to what women were wearing. The women ultimately end up being responsible. Women, you need to learn to take a compliment. We just want to tell you, oh, you're looking nice today, good morning. Why can't women just walk the road in peace? Why must we have to respond to men? Why is it, I told the officer, listen, if you were walking down the road and you saw a group of women at the corner, would you have to think about crossing the road? Would you have to think about, if you walk past them, what the men would be telling you? The guy, he said, no, I never really thought about that. But I said, when a woman sees a group of men standing at the corner of the road, there are many decisions she has to contemplate. Do I walk past? Do I cross the road? Do I turn back? I probably would turn back. Because you don't know what you have to hear, the disrespect. And don't get me wrong, there's some men that are very respectful. They say good morning. You say good morning, that's fine. And sometimes you say good morning and they take it as an invitation to feel that they want to come and have a conversation with you, and that they get offended when you don't continue having a conversation with them. So sometimes we women don't know what to do, and these are our young girls hearing this. These days I hear the boys are even touching the girls. In my day, you know, that there was that.
I'm sorry, but right? Could I ask you to wrap up?
Yeah, so I think we need to have interventions where it has to come from how we educate our men as well, our boys. And I think it's more, we have to have a holistic approach, not just put this on women. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. So our final 2 persons, and then we bring this to a close.
Hi, good night, everyone.
2 on this side, after you. So.
Okay. The same question that she had, why is it, because growing up, I was 25, so growing up, I always hear about women rights and women, because I grow a lot among a lot of aunts and so on, but you never hear much about men, how men evolve. And I think it's both parties, male and female, need to be involved, because nobody will become here, women just like that. All of us are children laughing in school, and what we go through in life would make us become who we are. So I think we need to start from a child growing up to adults. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This gentleman first, and then Dr. Bullen. The gentleman in the orange jersey, and then Dr. Bullen.
Good evening, everyone. I am a migrant, and all I'm hearing here, or all we have heard tonight, is the problem. Is there any solution? Mm-hmm. In America and Canada, there's a sexual abuse program. And then you put a guy in jail, comes out, or while he's in jail, he doesn't get any counseling or correctional programs. Then he comes out, and where he goes to live? The same area that he committed the crime. What are we doing? In America and Canada, take him away to the woods and he lives there for a certain period, a long period of time, then if they see fit, then he returns. But by that time, the child is already scarred. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Boleyn, the final one, and then we wrap it up at this end. Yes?
Well, I'm a child of Guyana. I'm also a child of Canada. And I've also been a teacher in the Canadian education system for 20 years, where I counseled youth. And so my question is to the panel and to the lawmakers who are here. What are you doing to ensure that work is done in the school system where there is strong resistance to sexual education, where I'm told by a CEO of education that parents fought against corporal punishment being removed from the schools? What is being done to educate youth and support, and through that education, support families who are of varied income levels? Because in our system, when you talk about the economic problems that affect the poor and lead to abuse, I'm glad that Dr. Reynolds pointed out that abuse happens at all levels economically. All right? So my question is, what is being done by your organizations to ensure that within the school system there is change so that educators are trained to teach about sexual education in the school, to change some of those attitudes that Nicole Cole mentioned affect our thinking and behavior in society. The attitudes towards sex that boys have and girls, that it's slamming, that it's nailing. So they learn these violent attitudes. The attitudes that sexual harassment is complementary and that there is nothing wrong with it. So it is left out of the laws. All right? And not addressed. That our institutions do not have policies in place to protect the individuals within those institutions, the school children, the workers, that policies have to be in place across the board. This is work that has to be done throughout the society. And when we're talking about interrogating sexual violence, tonight I heard a lot about child sexual abuse. But we have to understand the abuse that happens to all levels, at all levels, and to all vulnerable groups in this society, to disabled individuals, to the people within the LGBTQI community, to the incarcerated, you know, all right? And of course, it's horrific when we know, and Rhoda Reddock, Dr. Rhoda Reddock came recently, Professor Reddock spoke about the fact that a study that she did throughout the Caribbean showed that 98% of the cases that they looked at involved child sexual abuse, and it involved the parents and people known, trusted individuals to those children, all right? And that case, when I speak to people here in Guyana, it is the same. The statistics are the same. So there is something fundamentally wrong in the society in how we are teaching our youth and the programs and the supports that are missing, right, within the society for families so that they can function well and not be dysfunctional.
Thank you very much, Dr. Boleyn. And thank you very much for asking and answering most of the questions that you asked, and for answering quite a number of the questions that were also posed earlier. Because what we've learned from you and from others in the audience during the last round of questions is that we definitely need to look at our education, but not education as in the formal education, but our informal structures wherever they are, our religious education structures, every area that has to do with people, with our children, with our adults, with our relationships. Our women spend a lot of time there, you know. So those are places we have to relook at how we educate and how we empower and what information we share. We heard about the music. These are conversations that we have been interrogating for quite a while. And the panelists added their voices, their perspectives, and you added your own. And this is not a conversation that can close tonight. This has to continue, and it has to continue with each and every one of us being a voice. It has to continue with us when we WhatsApp in. When you say good morning, you know, sometimes for the morning I get about 20 good mornings from different people. Maybe we should send a WhatsApp that says, how's the child next door? Is that child going to school? You know, so we have to say things differently. We have to use the different media that we have and use them aggressively as we use them to promote other things. We don't have all the answers. The schools, the education officers are not here. But we are here, and we have children and grandchildren in schools. The police officer, I was talking to this young police officer that is going to do the vote of thanks, and I'm asking him about the rape kit, and he tells me he's not here to speak on that. Right? But we have to know. We have to know. I want to ask Dr. Reynolds, what about our rape kits at UG? You understand? We have to know, we have to have them in place. Social protection, what are we doing? I was pleased to hear about the numbers. For me, whilst numbers tell one story, they also tell about a change. So when the DPP said something, for me that meant something, because we knew of ages when nothing was happening. Now, even if it may seem small, it's a big small. You understand what I'm saying? So we are making movements, and for me, I'm thankful for those things. When I heard that Ms. Humphrey's story, it reminded me of so many other stories. That's why I left child protection, because I felt impotent. I felt that I was not making a difference. I felt that I could do nothing. I felt that if I got into education, I could have helped more. Because our systems are deficient. Our systems need a lot of work to do, but our budget doesn't go there. We're not able to advocate for enough within that sector. We shouldn't, but we have to. And we don't get as much as we would like to. That's a conversation that needs to happen. You know? But so let's keep the pressure on ourselves and others. We have to continue talking about this. We alone can't fix it, but I from Berbice. And if every Berbician tried, and every Georgetownian tries, and every Essequibian tries, and every agency tries, we don't have to go to Canada. We love Canada, I mean, for a vacation. But we have our own best practices right here that we can use. We can borrow other systems, but we know what to do, you know. We know where it hurts. We know what is wrong. But we have to be committed to fixing it. And there is where I think our problem lies. That level of commitment. And that is why Nicole sounds so true when she says that we accommodate. We are too accommodating. And we don't want bad name. Our culture, we talk about it all the time. But we got to fix it. We had a vice chancellor who said if you don't face it, you can't fix it. We have to face it, and we have to fix it. Nobody else can. Madam Fouet can come in and give us support. But the problem lies with us. It's ours. We have got to fix it. The judicial system will not work if the community people don't talk. The police cannot be as efficient if we don't report properly. If our women are not empowered, yes, we want to empower them, but sometimes our women fight our women, just as our men fight our women. So we are in this thing. We are tangled up, and you know, and we have got to sort it out. Nobody else. So tonight, as I hand the mic over to this police officer from UG, who is not going to talk to us about the rape kit at this point, who is going to nicely come and say the vote of thanks, I say to you, you have been a good audience, and it was my delight to work along with you. And I say to each and every one of you on the panel, thank you so much for being a good panel, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Talk about being placed on the spot. All protocols observed. Good evening to one and all. The task is mine this evening, not to speak on the rape kits, but of course to move the vote of thanks. And it's always a pleasure to be a part of an audience where you get the opportunity to hear rich discussions about things that are actually happening in our society and how well we can play a part in helping eradicate or become part of the solution. So the university wishes to extend sincere thanks to its partners for this event. UNICEF, we also wish to extend thanks to the panelists and speakers who contributed to this evening's proceedings. And of course, I made my own little jottings. Vice Chancellor Dr. Reynolds, thank you very much for your opening remarks. That formed the foundation that set the tone for this rich discussion this evening. Justice Cummins Edwards, Madam Justice, you did a really excellent job in informing us of the legal framework and the services that are available to men, women, and children who would have been victims of violence and who look forward to these support systems but really and truly don't know that it exists. So I thank you for sharing that with us. Ms. Foye, representative of UNICEF, thank you very much for informing us that while we need to celebrate the successes that we would have achieved over the years, we still need to focus on the how and how we can continue to help the victims of violence. Ms. Anne Green, it's always a pleasure hearing your presentations, and thank you for commencing your presentation with those startling figures. 980 persons abused for 2018. I am so happy that you would have informed us as well that failing to report a crime is a felony. So a lot of persons would normally stand by and say, well, it's not my concern, but I tell you this, it's all of our concerns because we all form part of the solution in eradicating sexual violence and any other form of violence within our society. Dr. Jones, thank you very much for sharing some of your strategies that the public health system has implemented to address, of course, this issue of sexual violence, conducting research, health strengths of, and looking at the responsibility of each and every one within society. And of course, most importantly, the cause. Ms. Colleen Humphrey, I believe she deserves another round of applause for that story. It was quite an emotional presentation, and we thank you very much for sharing your story. Because as a victim of sexual violence and how you were able to find strength and what love really truly is within your son, that caused us to think otherwise, and how we too can look for love in the most unusual places, but yet still there's hope that we can find it. Indeed, your story has truly inspired a lot of us sitting here in the audience. And of course, Ms. Richmond, thank you, Ms. Richmond, for sharing with us the link between violence and suicide. Tonight, you have not spoken to persons who don't want to hear a good story. You would have spoken to persons here who are willing to take up the mantle and act so that we all can eradicate sexual violence, and all other forms of violence from within our society. Ms. Nicole, thank you very much. You became the voice on behalf of Ms. Kimami, and as you cry out for justice within Guyana, and of course those for our children and society. And while citing that the courts have done and continue to do good work, there's still a lot more to be done. Thank you very much for your presentation. Honorable Aliak, thank you very much for focusing your presentation on activities thank you very much for focusing your presentation on sexual activity with children, those that were with penetration, and of course, rape. You have shared with us some alarming statistics, and I thank you for that because you would have opened our eyes to know that these things do exist in our society and that we need to stop it. We are happy and most thankful to you, the audience. You were quite attentive, you were quite supportive, and of course the questions and the comments also added richly to the panelists and their discussions. It is because of you we are now able to help people beyond this room in the fight to eradicate sexual violence in our society. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much. And of course, it will not have been even possible to reach international waters, internationally, if it was not for, of course, the possibility of having our media partners here. And so we thank you very much for your hard work and your continued support as we too try to eradicate sexual violence. Most of the talk that we will be seeing here, the team talks, would not have been possible without the hard work. Thank you very much, you may be seated. Without the hard work of a lot of people that you won't even know, but I'm still going to mention them. And so the university makes this a success. The persons who are responsible for this includes Ms. Joanne Ramlajan and the staff of Pegasus Hotel. We thank you very much. The Deputy Vice Chancellor, PACE, Professor Paloma Mohammed and her team. We would also like to thank Ms. Africa Esbrand, Ms. Travana Aziz, Ms. Christine Chow Wajir, Ms. Tara Smith, Ms. Myrnie Gopal, of course, Mr. Norwell Hines and his team. Sincerely, we would like to, and his intern, we would sincerely like to thank Chanelly Wilson, Ms. Samari Williams, and Keon Hines. The personal officer, Mr. Jeffrey Walcott, the local media, of course, Corps, and Mr. Neil Suklal and the staff of Impressions, Inc. We are also grateful for the work of those members of the university community who serve as ushers, and to you, the civil society participants, who grace us with your presence and ideas from the floor and online.